Hey, everybody at SaaStr. A lot of folks have been asking us about how we use AI. What have we learned from AI? At SaaStr itself, we went from having essentially zero AI agents at the start of the year to now having over 12 AI agents in production, at least four for sales for AI SDRs and BDRs. We have a digital JSON that answers over 150,000 chats on our SaaStr websites and so much more. And so I think we do know something here. I think we do know how to effectively vibe code app, deploy AI agents, and more. And we're doing a lot of this across our SaaStr content, our Workshop Wednesdays, and others. But I thought it might be helpful to do a deep dive on some of the things that we've learned the most, that I've learned the most, and that folks are asking the most about. So I want to do three things today. One, talk about Replit V3, version 3, super interesting look at the future. The second, talk about our latest AI BDR, why you have to have it. And the third is tools we built ourselves. We've done over 300,000 startup valuations on our AI calculator. And we've also graded and helped improve almost 1,000 pitch decks in less than 2 weeks. I want to talk about how we did that, what we've learned, and a bit more. Okay, first one, Replit V3. Look, if you want, there's an Uber topic. Can you build your own B2B app without a team of developers, without a developer? And so I started on this Replit journey a couple months ago. There's a few leaders. There's Replit. There's Lovable, you've heard of. There's Bolt, which kicked off a lot of this. There's hot newcomers. Wixbot, a startup called Base44 that may have as much as 10% market share. And there's a lot of up-and-comers, many of whom are already doing 8 figures in revenue very quickly. Underneath the hood, they all do the same thing. They create a thick layer and a lot of functionality on top of Claude Code. I think they all use Claude Code today, but they help non-developers get apps out of it. And for the most part, if you've tried any of these, they start with a prompt, and you can seemingly type anything into it. I want to build my own Salesforce, but for veterinary clinics, or I want to build my own HubSpot for charities. And the marketing will encourage you to do these things. But the truth is, like most things, it's much more complicated. And in fact, the first project I tried to build, which was a matching product for the SaaStr community, was very complicated. I couldn't get it really to work. I will eventually. But I've come back and gotten 7 products into production for real without a developer. And that's pretty cool. And I think we have learned a ton. And already just in those couple of months, I chose Replit. A lot of them are good. A lot of them are cool. Why did I choose Replit? If you're curious, because at the time I asked Twitter which one I should pick. I didn't know. And basically everyone said they were somewhat similar a couple months ago, which I think was true a couple months ago. But Replit was the one that you could go end to end. In other words, I could start building an app. I could test it. I could prototype it. I could push it into production, all without having to configure a database, move it somewhere else for hosting, just all the headaches I didn't want to deal with at this point in my life. I wanted to go end to end. And at the time, Replit was the only leader that can do that. That's certainly changed. But if nothing else, the fact that it white labeled the database, this Neon database that Databricks bought, made it much easier to use than other tools because you didn't have to hook up admittedly cool product like Superbase and others. You could just go and not worry about database or hosting or domains or anything. So anyhow, that's where I started. And deep down, actually, Replit didn't even use the most latest versions of Claude and Anthropic. It uses actually the N-1 version, and that could still do a lot of things. But then recently they launched V3, and unless you're deep in the ecosystem or nerdy, you might not have seen it. But I think it is the first glimpse of the future of what is coming next. And what do I mean is, so V3, the third version of Replit, frankly, for the average user, the average person that hasn't built an app, hasn't managed a team, hasn't done a startup, you might actually not know that it's better. Okay. In fact, in some ways for a newbie, V3 might be worse because it is, quote, smarter. So it can use more tokens and cost you more. And in fact, the smarter an AI is, the slower it can be. Sometimes V3 is actually slower. And after Replit launched, in fact, they had to come back and let you tune just how smart you wanted it to be, how deep you wanted it to go, because it could go really long, and that might drive a lot of folks nuts. But it does one super cool thing that I think people may have underestimated the power. Then I'll share how I use it and how we learn. But now it has agents that can manage agents. So if you're on X and you're on the internet, you'll hear lots of folks talking about agents managing agents, but most of us don't even have a single AI agent in production. And a lot of folks are talking out of their rear or making stuff up or don't know what they're talking about. And they're envisioning a future where one AI can manage 20 AIs that manages another 20 AIs and so on in a nested function. And maybe that will happen, but for the most part, it's not here today. For the most part, we're struggling to get one AI SDR to work or one AI customer success tool to work, let alone have an AI manage 20 of these tools. But Replit can do it. And so what happened before V3 is you'd have an AI agent and you would say, I want to build something where I can grade founders' pitches, which is what we built at SaaStr. And it would think on it and it would start off barely working and you would iterate and go there. Now, when things get hard, Replit brings in other agents. It brings in an architect for really tough problems. It brings in specialists. It has a senior and a junior agent. And I'm not sure how many agents there are. And some of them are not truly distinct agents. Some of them are different flavors of the Replit AI, but they are different and distinct. And it blew my mind the first time I used this V3 on a complex problem, and Replit just couldn't solve it. And it can't solve a lot of things, the AI agent. It can do a lot, but it can't solve every issue. And when it got complex, it brought in an architect to solve the problem. Now, pretty crazy that you have an AI autonomously managing other AIs in Replit. If you doubted that was coming, there's a hint of it that's already here. It's pretty damn cool and blew my mind. And you can watch the agents in Replit talking to each other and debating it. Literally in English, it's pretty crazy, my friends. Okay, so what did I do with this V3? I did one thing that actually was pretty interesting, and the other stuff I'm not sure yet because it's early. The one thing I did with V3 is on one of our sites, I had it do a deep security audit. Ultimately, honestly, if you are vibe coding for real, a B2B application, you got to learn. It's going to take longer than you think. You got to get to know how these agents work. You got to be patient. You're going to have to do QA yourself. But at the end of the day, if you can get something all the way into production, something to go out, your biggest concern is going to be security, especially if you're collecting any user information at all. The last thing you want are security issues, and there are plenty in general. Forget about little vibe-coded apps. The major leaders have security issues. Goodness, poor Clary Salesloft bought Drift, merged them together, and then Drift had some security issue with its Salesforce token, and everyone from Cloudflare on down had their CRM data leaked. So if it's going to happen to someone at that scale, it can happen to you. So you should be worried about security. So with this new V3, I had them do a deep security audit. And it was pretty crazy. Before V3, typically Replit could work, I don't know how long. It had longer windows, but typically it could work a few minutes and then it would peter out. It did a security audit for almost 3 hours. And these agents all went out together and they went through every line of code, every function, every page, and they debated how much to lock down the SaaStr AI app for security. And I went away for 3 hours. I came back around 2 hours and 45 minutes and they'd finally finished these debates. It was crazy. It was crazy that they could do this for up to 3 hours. They could do it autonomously and they could debate with each other. Now, interestingly, for the future, it went too far. So what I mean is the general agent would call in the security specialist and the architect, and they kept locking things down to make it more secure. And the general agent would seemingly argue, hey, don't go too far. The app still needs to work, but would get overridden by the architect and the specialist. And did go too far. By the time it seemed cool, but then when I went to use the app again, it had locked down uploads. Like you couldn't upload a PDF to have your PDF reviewed. You couldn't upload anything. It was all locked down as a security issue. And listen, no question, like there are issues. If you upload a document, there could be a virus in it. There could be executable code. There can be lots of issues. So I get in an extreme world, you'd want to lock that down. But if the whole point of an app is to allow an upload, it went too far. So we did a lot of cool things. The agents on their own did a lot of cool things in those almost 3 hours, but I spent over 10 hours undoing it. And I undid it very slowly, but I had to retest every page, every link, everything, because anything that was interactive had gotten locked down to be super secure, and none of it worked. Like literally nothing worked. Even like basic reporting, everything would say 0 because to be secure, share nothing. So it took me 10 hours in a full week to peel the layers back of that onion and undo some of that security audit. So in a sense, that was a total pain, but it was a learning experience because that wouldn't even be possible without the latest version of Replit. Do I want to do that every day? Do I want to run a 3-hour security audit every day and take 10 hours working on the outputs? No, that's something you do once per big release, but it's so cool that it's there. It's so cool that it will keep getting better. So that was just super neat. But Ned, I will say for the B2B folks that might be watching or listening, another learning from this V3, it's so cool, but man, it's different. It is so different than the V2 at Replit. And so many folks got upset on the internet. So many folks got upset on Reddit and across for a lot of reasons. Their costs went up. But the biggest reason folks got upset is because V3 is just different and we weren't asked. Replit didn't offer an opportunity for folks to use V2 that still wanted to use V2, nor did ChatGPT when it rolled out GPT-5, nor did OpenAI offer a version for folks that wanted the old ones, and folks revolted there so much they had to offer some limited ability to use GPT-4. Replit didn't do that, and it's just interesting when you're moving at AI speed, like you have to. Replit has deep competition. You got to move this quickly, but as we go more mainstream, we're going to collide with the reality that folks only want so much business process change. And I think V3 is super cool, but if V2 was good enough for you, you might not want it. It might take a lot of learning, and you didn't want to learn V3, and you didn't want to learn how the agent had changed, and you didn't want to learn these new functionalities for how much autonomy to allow the agent. I'm guessing the majority of lay Replit users, not the power users, not the folks that live and breathe in it, might not even wanted that changed. It might be a net negative because they were fine with what they had before. So it's just an interesting learning from business process change. Super cool, incredibly powerful. I thought it was so cool, but it also ended up consuming 10 hours of my time for something that I could do very cool autonomously, but maybe others wouldn't want to invest that 10 hours of time. So I think we are ignoring a lot of business process changes in AI in the race to compete and push out new releases every day. But here was one where the Replit community had a hard time absorbing the coolness of V3. Okay, second thing just wanted to share from the week is we rolled out essentially our fourth AI SDR BDR. So we've got about 4 of these live on SaaStr now. The first 3, we used an app called Artisan. We got to know them. We actually rolled out 3 different AI there, 3 different autonomous agents that essentially do outbound. We've talked about that on other podcasts. I'll talk about further learnings in the future. But basically, one reaches out to potential sponsors and partners for our big events. One reaches out to folks to come to our events. And one does recirculation for folks that have previously been to get them back. And they have different workflows and different training. So we have 3 of those, which is interesting in and of itself. We started with 1 AI outbound SDR. Now we have 3 for 3 different workflows. So we would recommend the same to you. And then it took a minute, and then we added one, as I think as a BDR, we all use these terms differently, to manage our inbound in particular. So inbound in particular to our event sites, to folks that come to SaaStrAnnual.com, SaaStrLondon.com. This December, where we're all going to talk about AI and GTM and teach you how to do it. They come to us and they have a bunch of things. They'll have general questions. Where in London is the event? They'll want to buy tickets and they'll want to sponsor, and they'll also want to speak. So we have different functionalities for each. We actually built a totally different AI agent for folks that want to speak. So cool, but a different topic. But we added one from Qualified, a vendor called Qualified, to qualify the folks on SaaStrAnnual.com and SaaStr London. And if you want to try it, just go to SaaStrAnnual.com or SaaStrLondon.com, and you'll see a little chat window pop up. Superficially, it looks like everything else. It looks like Intercom or Fin or Dagagon or anything. Frankly, all these chat bubbles look the same. Or our generic one we use from Delphi that's done 150,000 conversations that you can just find on SaaStr.com or SaaStr AI. It's not the bubble that really distinguishes anything anymore. They all look the same. But what's very clever about this one is it integrates with all of our data. It integrates with all of our Salesforce data. And for better or worse, we use Marketo, which is very dated for marketing automation. We're locked into it, but it integrates with all of it seamlessly. So if you go and you've sponsored before or been to a SaaStr event over the last decade, as 50,000 or more people have, we'll already know about you. We'll already know about you. And we'll know, and interestingly, if you're a potential sponsor, a customer, we'll already know who else is there. So if Adyen comes, we'll let them know, hey, did you know Stripe sponsored last year? And we'll also have Bill.com, and we'll have other folks. And we'll have Maxio. We'll know similar folks. We'll know competitors. We'll know others. We just talked about Artisan for our outbound SDR. If another AI SDR comes to the site, we'll know, and we'll tell them how Artisan did last year and that they got $500,000 of pipeline out of the event on site. And so we can share all that stuff in real time rather than the typical either lame experience you get in chat or even worse. So it does all that. It has all the data. By having that, and then it can do, that's cool enough as it is. But then it does 2 other things that for us, because we're tiny, we're more AIs than humans at SaaStr now. It does 2 things for us that are super powerful. 2, by knowing who you are and just asking you questions through chat, it qualifies you better than a human could. I don't know about you, but there's nothing more soul crushing to me than when I go to an app, I click contact me, which is, I hate as it is. You probably do too. And then I finally get connected to sales, and all it is some kid that knows nothing that's qualifying me to decide if it's worth their time for an AE to talk to me. That's just like an F minus before AI. It's terrible today. So this AI BDR from qualified qualifies the prospect without the prospect knowing they're being qualified, which is lovely. And then it automatically sets up a meeting with one of our tiny sales team. Could you do pieces of this before? Absolutely. Listen, you can set up great meetings with Calendly. I know there's lots of tools that do some sort of qualification in the background, and there's certainly knowledge bases, but this does it all in one. It links everything up to our Salesforce and Marketo data from a decade. It qualifies them without them feeling like they're being qualified. It solves their problems if they have them, and then it sets up a meeting with sales in real time. It's so cool. And not only is it cool, it can surface new opportunities. So for example, this is a very small example, but someone reached out and they wanted to bring 30 CEOs to SaaStr AI London in December. It created that whole idea and created a package and came out to us and suggested the idea. So it can create new opportunities, new things that you might not have even thought about. But taking all that friction out and letting customers not feel like they're qualified, get a meeting set up in real time, get their answers, there's just no excuse to not have that. Now, a couple things. So you should do this. You should do this. Whether it's qualified or another vendor, take a pause. Go to your own website. Try to buy your own product, folks. I bet it's worse than what I just described. I bet you can't get great answers in real time. I bet you can't be auto-qualified. I bet you can't get a meeting set up in real time with the right sales rep that can help you. I bet not. You can't do it. Little SaaStr did that. Little SaaStr did, so you better do it. But one caveat and then a couple other points on this. The biggest caveat is, and we've said this on our SaaStr content so many times, you've got to train it. Good God, you've got to train it. We just did a whole deep dive on this, and you can see it on the SaaStr YouTube channel on our top 10 agents we put into production. But you've got to train them. Now, it turns out, and frankly, I didn't know this at first, training is different than you think. When we launched our first AI agent, which was a general agent built on Delphi, try it at the bottom of SaaStr.com. It's trained on 20 million words of SaaStr content. It's trained on everything I've ever written, said, or done. It's all there. Ask Digital Jason any questions about how to build a comp plan, what to do about a struggling VP of marketing, what to do if you're running out of money, whatever it is, ask Digital Jason, and the answers will be insanely great. And it is great. And it's one of the best ones I've objectively ever seen. And at first I thought it was great because it had 20 million words of content. We were still learning on our journey. But then as we started to train other agents, and then as the CEO of Delphi came to SaaStr Annual this year and compared me to Brian Halligan's, to Lenny Rachinsky's, to Keith Rabah's agents all built on the same platform, what we learned, and he ran 1 million conversations simulated through all of our AI agents. What I learned from that is that actually you don't need quite as much data to train as you think. The old stuff, the old SaaStr content, the old stuff, it's not that valuable. So in fact, you only need so long of a tail to train an AI. What you need is a little bit of really good content to get it going, which even if you're a startup, you have your website, you have a sales pitch, you have some collateral, you have some reference customers. You don't need as much as SaaStr has to get your AI trained. And then you have to constantly A/B test and iterate and add more. And so every single interaction that we have on this AI BDR, we're watching it in real time, we're reviewing it every single day. We're proofing and correcting anything that's wrong, and we're running a lot of A/B tests to improve it. So a lot of folks complain. I literally saw someone on LinkedIn today complaining that they deployed an AI SDR and it didn't work. It didn't work. And then someone said, SaaStr's worked, and the response was, SaaStr has so much content and so much data. All true, but the learning is you don't need as much as you think. You need a certain amount of data, a certain amount of knowledge to upload, and then you just need to relentlessly iterate. And folks want to set and forget does not work, folks. Set and forget, you have to relentlessly iterate on these AI platforms, and that's why ours is pretty darn good. And then I'll give just two contrasting examples on this. I used two AIs this last week, two AIs in support that were terrible, much worse than what we have. And I'll give some examples, and it's why you have to train yours. The first one it was more for fun, was Brex kept sending us an email request to please deposit $5 million with them to maintain our credit limits. Now, the emails were crazy. They were written by AI. If they'd been written more clearly, it wouldn't have been so funny. What Brex really wanted to say is basically Brex will give you credit for about 20% of whatever you have in all your banks as long as Brex can basically have a lien on them, can call that if you default. That's pretty common. I have some lines of credit with Morgan Stanley. The one that there's a large one which is secured with your own cash. Hooray. There's not a lot of risk to Morgan Stanley there. And then there's one secured by your securities. There's more risk. Stocks can go up and down. So I think I can only borrow about 20% on my Morgan Stanley line for stocks. That's about what Brex gives you. So it's probably a similar risk profile. But it didn't explain it that way. It was these alarming emails that I got from like the chief credit officer, the chief operating officer. Like they kept being from different officers, seemingly saying we had to immediately deposit $5 million at Brex. They were so funny. I didn't take it too seriously, but I just wanted to learn. Then I said, heck it, let me try Brex's AI. And Brex's AI, I believe they use Decagon, which is super hot, super smart CEO, super smart team. A lot of tech leaders are using Decagon. And it wouldn't let me talk to, even chat with an AI. It wouldn't let me talk to a human. I described the problem and it refused to solve it and close the window. Okay, there's a lot of terrible things in that, but the biggest failing here was it wasn't trained, because I wasn't the only one that got this email, okay? Other folks laughed on it when I put it on Twitter, on X. It should have been trained. It should have been trained on the fact that a lot of people get this email that seems alarming, that they have to deposit millions of dollars in Brex, and the AI agent should have said, Jason, we hear you. That folks have misinterpreted that. You do not have to put $5 million at Brex. Here's how it works. The more accounts you have connected to Brex, the more credit we can give you. This did not need 20 million words in 10 years. It needed a human being sampling the issues at Decagon and then uploading just a bit of content to answer this question properly. But instead, Brex created a terrible customer experience when there was no need to if this AI was properly trained. Okay. Second one for fun. I love Replit. I've had some bumps. If you followed me on social media, I do love it. I'm a super fan. But I had a bump with Replit recently. It was minor, but it was a bump. I couldn't get something fixed. 99.9% of stuff now I can get fixed with the agent. But there was I had one issue. And for the first time, I decided to reach out to support. Now, even today, Replit uses email-only support with Zendesk AI. And it was not good. It was not good. It kept emailing me and asking me to send screenshots, these AI support people, but it wasn't trained on the exact issue. It just couldn't solve it for an entire day. And I don't know. I don't mean this to be, I love Replit and they are getting better, but I just don't think they trained the Zendesk AI. It was giving me generic answers and they were unhelpful. And I basically had an infrastructure issue that could be solved. It was a little annoying, but it could be solved in just minutes with some advice, but I just couldn't get it. The AI wasn't trained. So listen, no criticism here per se, more criticism for Brex. It's inexcusable to not train Decagon to answer these alarming emails that a lot of us were getting. The Replit one is more subtle because Replit's challenge is everyone's building hundreds of thousands of apps. So everyone's experiencing hundreds of thousands of different issues. With Brex, there were thousands of people having the same issue as me. There was no excuse to not train Decagon. Replit, it's more subtle, but the agent wasn't trained to be more direct and honest. Replit was just assuming email support would work and that it could handle it. It's not enough. You have to be monitoring these agents constantly. The lesson from both of these is there is no set and forget with AI agents, at least not in the way we use them for sales, support, marketing. You have to train them relentlessly. And even more, it's not what a lot of people think, which is massive amounts of data up front, and then you could ignore it. No, it's a body of content, which you have enough of to train your AI agent, and then every day relentlessly watching it, seeing it, QAing it, testing it, and making it better every single day so that whatever problems you have don't recur. And it's not acceptable if you haven't done that, but the power is if you do it, unlike humans, the mistakes don't recur. So anyone that's managed mediocre AEs or SDRs will bang their head on the table when you trained somebody, hey, don't say our product does that, and they keep saying it again and again. And the new people keep saying it again and again, and they keep saying things that aren't true. It drives you nuts. Listen, training an AI is as much or more work than training a human, but if you do it reasonably correct, they won't keep making the same mistakes again and again, which is so wonderful. And shame on these two experiences, but they could have been solved in minutes by training. Okay, last one for the day, just for fun, some learnings from vibe coding again. If you go to SaaStr.ai, which is our new homepage, we're maintaining SaaStr.com and keeping SaaStr.ai. And for folks that know SaaStr, you might wonder why we're doing that. I'm still learning. But we have a ton of SEO on SaaStr.com. We have 35 million views a year or so from SEO. And moving off that domain, moving off those static URLs, moving off that content to a new platform, super risky. So the new SaaStr.ai is shiny and cool. I built it on Replit. I love it. Took a lot of time, but it's super cool. But it's not built on WordPress, and it isn't built the same way, and it doesn't have the same SEO benefits. So we're in this weird world where we have two SaaStr platforms, SaaStr AI, SaaStr.com. There are probably not too many people doing this, but I think we're at the bleeding edge here, and it's an issue others will have to deal with in the coming years. Do you want a state-of-the-art dynamic platform that can do things you can't do, or do you want to use something like WordPress, or do you want to try to hybridize it? But even hybridize it's really complicated, right? So a lot of folks are like, why don't you export all your SaaStr AI code and run it in WordPress? But that's not elegant. There's ways to do it, but then it's slow and clunky. And how do I edit it? And how do I add new features? And how do I do all the wonderful things I do in Replit, where I can make something up and bring it to life? I can't really do that if it's now running in some weird HTML or CSS sort of container in WordPress. It's not going to work. So we're at the bleeding edge here. But check it out at SaaStr.ai. We've got about 10 or 20% of our traffic there, but about 30,000 people a month are using it. And probably the most popular stuff are our tools. There are tools. So if you go to the bottom, there's a tools link. But even better, go to the top and hit AI VC. And we've got two tools we've rolled out that are super popular that I built myself, which we'll talk about for a minute and then we can wrap. We built a valuation calculator where we took all the data we could find, all the public data from Carta, from Bessemer, from Emergence, from any source that talked about how AI enhanced and non-AI B2B startups are being valued today. We took all of it and then we distilled it all. A lot of data. It's so much data all over the place, hard to process. We distilled it all into a super simple calculator. What type of B2B startup are you? What stage are you at? What's your ARR and what's your growth? And I know we're all different and I know we're all doing different things, but the reality is from a VC perspective, you're not that different. You are those things. What type of startup are you? How quickly are you going? What's your revenue? And that's about it. And we distill it into pretty accurate estimates of your valuation. And I compared it with all the VC rounds that I've done in my SaaStr fund portfolio, pretty much correct. Pretty much correct. If your growth is super slow, it's less perfect. But if you're growing 30, 40, 50% or faster, it's not going to tell you exactly what you might be acquired for. It's not going to tell you other things, but it'll probably give you a pretty good sense of what VCs would value at, if anything. We launched it. We've done over 300,000 free valuations on it. It is so cool. So try it for free. If you're growing 300 to 3,000%, try it, and we'll tell you what your startup's probably worth. Then we added a second tool, a VC pitch deck analyzer, about a week and a half ago. Already over 1,000 founders have uploaded their VC pitch decks. We grade it. We tell you how VCs will think about it. We tell you your odds of getting funded, and we tell you all the areas to improve and update. And even we're starting to introduce you directly to VCs on it, which is pretty cool. We're going to do even more there. So try it. These are super cool. Just a couple things about why they're great for vibe coding for folks in general. My learning from the 7 vibe code apps I've gotten into production on Replit, but why my first one failed, is offload the complexity. Offload the complexity. And let's talk about that and then we'll break. The first app I did, I tried to build an algorithm and build matching and build all inside of Replit without being smart enough to know exactly what I was doing. So we wanted to match 10,000 people coming to SaaStr with each other. That's like 10,000 times 10,000 potential matches. We wanted to do it in real time. We wanted each to be individual and bespoke. And it just became so complicated that it was beyond my skill set at the time, vibe coding, and it was beyond what really made sense because it's so many calculations, so many permutations. It was a dumb way to do it, but it was my first app, and I went too complicated on many levels. These seemingly are just as complicated, right? How do you accurately value 300,000 startups or 300,000 calculations? How do you review 1,000 VC pitch decks? Look, a long topic, but what I learned is offload it. So for these VC calculations, what I took is essentially thousands and thousands of funding rounds and pieces of data, a lot of it. But instead of asking Replit to crunch all the data each time someone wanted to, I went into Claude, I put in all the data, and I summarized it in a series of complex but still somewhat simple tables. So I distilled what could be tens of thousands of data points and tens of thousands of data to combine into essentially 4 tables. Maybe it's 16 tables. But that's it. So I distilled it all, I put it all into Replit, and then we tuned it based on certain things. But we took 5,000 funding rounds and more and distilled it into 4 simple tables. Then we could just fly with just a little bit of hint of OpenAI API. Same thing with the VC pitch analyzer. I basically combined the learnings from 800 VCs that had spoken at annual and all that learning from the 5,000 venture rounds. And then I simplified them and pushed them all into the Anthropic API so that we offload a lot of this work to Anthropic. And then I tuned it and saw what worked and what didn't and ran about 100 different decks, including all the recent ones from SaaStr Fund that have gotten funded. And I tuned it and I changed the weights in essence. I'm using weights in a lay sense. But Anthropic's doing 90% of the work. And for this use case, Anthropic seemed to work better than OpenAI. But in any event, I offloaded the heavy lifting to get these vibe code apps. For the first one, to analyze how much your startup is worth, I pre-ran the algorithms in Claude and then just gave the outputs to Replit. For the VC pitch one, I figured out, I ran a whole bunch of them to figure out what is a very complex but manageable prompt to then just give the Anthropic API so that it works again and again. Net, super cool. These are free. They're fast. They're simple. You don't even have to sign up or register. Go to SaaStr.ai and hit AI VC at the top to try them. My learning is if you want to do complex AI stuff, have the AI do as much of it as you can. All right. Thanks, everybody.